It's a bad sign when the person who helps you out daily starts looking away. I'm Michael Stone, pushing 45, a lead numbers guy at Horizon Systems in a city out west. I'd been keeping the book straight for just over 10 years. Not the most exciting gig, but it kept my brain busy and helped put my kid through school. That morning, Clara, who always had a cheerful hello and my coffee ready, was buried in papers when I walked in. Didn't look up, didn't say hi, just kept shuffling documents like I wasn't there. Something felt different. You could feel it in the office air. Chats would stop when I came near. Invites to meetings I should have been in suddenly disappeared. And most worrying, my access to certain financial files on the company system had been quietly shut off a couple of days before. I sat at my desk, opened my spreadsheets, and began going over the quarterly reports I'd been working on before Mr. James arrived. He was the new finance chief, brought in after our longtime finance head, Mr. Peterson, had a health scare and took an early retirement. James came with a fancy background from a big firm back east and a confidence that took up all the space in a room, leaving no room for questions. The numbers weren't adding up right. I'd spotted it about 4 weeks earlier. Payments to suppliers without the needed proof, money counted as earned months before the deals were actually done, and a strange account that seemed to hold millions, showing up and then vanishing between reporting times. The first time I brought it up in the finance meeting, James just smiled, patted me on the back, and said, "Just different ways of doing things than you're used to, Michael. Trust the process." The second time, I emailed him straight away with clear examples. Spreadsheets showed the problems. No reply. The third time, yesterday, I found him alone in the break room. "I need to talk about these issues," I said softly. "The report for the last quarter is showing." "Michael," he cut me off, slowly stirring his tea, "you're part of the old guard here. I get that, but we're updating our methods. The board wants growth. Focus on the big picture." I didn't get much sleep after that. 25 years in accounting had taught me that when someone tells you to ignore the small stuff and focus on the big picture when it comes to money reports, something is usually wrong. As I looked through the latest files I could still get to, an email popped up from the HR department. Subject: Meeting request 11 a.m. today. I closed my laptop, took a sip of the coffee I'd bought on the way in, and started tidying my desk. I knew what was coming. I joined Horizon Systems back when we were just around 50 people in a small building before we went public, before the tech rush hit our city. Now we had several hundred employees, a fancy office downtown, and big investors who expected steady growth every 3 months. My wife, Emily, used to joke that I was married to my spreadsheets. "You see stories in those numbers," she'd say. She wasn't wrong. I could find patterns, things that didn't fit, the places where human nature messed with what should be simple facts. That eye for detail had earned me Mr. Peterson's trust. He'd called me his red flag spotter. Companies need at least one person who can't be sweet-talked or scared out of seeing what's there, he'd told me over a drink after we'd caught the sales team trying to count money from deals that weren't actually finished. I thought about my brother-in-law, David, Emily's younger brother, who went into government work instead of the business world. He worked for the federal financial watchdog in their enforcement group. We weren't super close, but we respected each other and had decent chats at family get-togethers about rules and big money cases in the news. A while back during the holidays, when everyone else was watching a game, we ended up talking on the back porch about a company fraud case that made headlines. By the time we get involved, it's usually been going on for months, sometimes years, David had said. Most frauds get caught because someone inside realizes what's happening and speaks up. Whistleblowers, I'd said. Just people with a sense of right and wrong and eyes to see, he corrected. The ones who can't pretend they don't notice. The memory faded as I checked my watch. 10:50. Almost time for my meeting with HR. Looking back, I should have seen this happening sooner. The signs were all there. James had been slowly cutting me out since his first few weeks. Questions I asked in meetings were ignored. My team was slowly given other tasks. My reports were simplified or buried. Then recently, I'd found it. The clear proof. Looking over some old data, I saw a pattern of faking revenue that covered the last 2 quarters. Millions of dollars moved between different parts of the company, fake sales recorded, contracts dated earlier than they were. Not hidden if you knew where to look, but a disaster if it kept going. I wrote everything down carefully, made copies, saved them securely just in case. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "How's your day?" I didn't reply. Better to tell her in person tonight. I closed the company financial report I was looking at, locked my computer, and headed to the HR conference room. Time to face whatever came next. "We're making changes in the finance department," said James, sitting next to Sarah from HR. "Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated." I nodded, showing no emotion. This wasn't a shock, but the careful wording was almost funny. Not fired, eliminated, like I was just a line in the budget being crossed out. "Your long experience has been helpful," James continued, "but we're moving towards more automatic systems, looking more ahead." "I see," I said. Sarah slid a folder across the table. "This has details about your severance package, continuing benefits, and a non-disclosure agreement we'll need you to sign." I opened it, quickly read the first page. 7 months' salary. Okay. The non-disclosure agreement was very long, specifically stopping me from talking about Horizon Systems' financial ways, how they reported things, or their private business methods with anyone. "Take your time reading it," Sarah said. "We don't need an answer today." "And of course," James added with a tight smile, "we'd appreciate you keeping our talk here quiet for the team's morale." I closed the folder. "I'll need to look this over with my lawyer." Something quickly crossed James's face. Annoyance. Maybe worry. He hadn't expected any pushback, even this small. "Of course," Sarah smoothly jumped in. "That's standard procedure. In the meantime, we'll need to start the process of you leaving today." About 40 minutes later, I was walked to my desk by a security guard. A cardboard box for my personal items. Email access already shut off. Company ID card taken. A few co-workers watched from their desks, looking embarrassed or relieved it wasn't them. As I packed my family photos in the ceramic cup my kid made years ago, Clara finally met my eyes. "I'm sorry, Michael," she whispered. "This isn't right." I just nodded. Not her fault. Tom from my group walked by, stopped for a moment, then came over to help me pack. "They've given all your past work to the new group from the East Coast," he muttered, pretending to tidy papers. "Nobody's explaining the changes in how we do things." I slipped him my personal email address on a small note. "If you have questions later." The security guard cleared his throat. Time to go. Walking through the lobby with my box, past the shiny sign with the company logo I'd helped create, something inside me changed. Not anger exactly, something colder, clearer. For weeks, I'd been fighting with doubt, wondering if I was reading the numbers wrong, if I just didn't like change. Now I knew. They wouldn't fire a lead accountant over updating systems. They'd fire someone who saw too much. In my car, I sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. I didn't slam the dashboard or curse. Instead, I pulled out my phone and looked at the small USB drive tucked in my wallet, the one with copies of everything I'd written down. Then I scrolled to David's number. My brother-in-law at the Federal Financial Watchdog. I hadn't called him in months, hadn't really wanted to mix family and work. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about investors being lied to, rules being broken, a company I'd helped build being hollowed out from the inside. I pressed call. "David, it's Michael. I think we need to talk. They want you to sign this." David slid the severance agreement back across my kitchen table, his face serious in the evening light. "This non-disclosure agreement is extremely broad." Emily poured more coffee, her movements sharp with anger. After hearing what happened, she'd immediately called her brother. He'd driven over straight from his office. 7 months' salary is a lot, I said. "But they're buying silence. And they know exactly what you've seen," David said. He looked thinner than I remembered. His government job apparently didn't leave much time for regular meals. Otherwise, they wouldn't offer this much. I handed him the USB drive. "Everything I found is here. Revenue manipulation over a couple of quarters at least. Fake transactions, moving money between different parts of the company to make growth numbers look bigger." David put it in his pocket, but shook his head. This is definitely concerning, but I need to be clear. If you sign that non-disclosure agreement and then share this information, they could sue you personally. The federal financial watchdog could still investigate, but you'd be open to legal trouble. So, they get away with it? Emily asked, her voice getting louder. Not necessarily. David ran a hand through his thinning hair. Michael hasn't signed anything yet, but we need to be careful about what we do next. The next morning, I got in touch with a lawyer who specialized in job issues. Lisa Green listened carefully to my situation, looked over the severance agreement, and agreed with what David had said. This non-disclosure agreement would effectively stop you from being a whistleblower, she said. I'd advise against signing it as it is. Can we try to get better terms? She smiled thinly. We can try. A couple of days later, I got a call from James himself, not HR. His voice was tight. Michael, I understand you've hired legal help to look at the agreement. Standard procedure, I said back using his earlier words. A pause. We value your years here and want this change to go smoothly for everyone. Maybe we can meet to talk about what you're worried about. That afternoon, I was back in the same conference room, this time with Lisa beside me, facing James and the company's main lawyer, a stern woman named Brenda. We can increase the severance to 10 months, James offered. But the parts about keeping things secret are not up for discussion. Lisa smiled politely. My client is concerned about some financial problems he saw while he worked here. The current wording could be seen as stopping him from doing what he's legally required to if there are rule issues. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Are you saying Mr. Stone plans to make claims against Horizon Systems? I'm saying, Lisa replied, that my client cannot give up his legal right to report potentially unlawful activity, no matter what agreement is signed. The room seemed to get much colder. I think we need to be very clear, James said, leaning forward. There are no problems or unlawful activities at Horizon Systems. What we have is a former employee who perhaps didn't understand our updated accounting methods and might be holding on to anger about changes in the company. He slid a new paper across the table. We're ready to offer 14 months' salary. Quite a lot, but we'll need a signed statement confirming you didn't see any illegal activities during your time here along with the non-disclosure agreement. I felt Lisa stiffen next to me. We'll need to look at this new offer, she said, gathering her papers. In the elevator down, she was direct. They're scared. That offer is basically asking you to sign a false statement, which would make me look unreliable if I ever came forward later, I realized. Exactly. And 14 months' salary is a small price for them to pay to shut down a possible whistleblower. As we walked through the lobby, I noticed Tom from my group hurrying in through the main door. When he saw me, his eyes got wide. He turned towards the coffee shop in the building instead of the elevators. I told Lisa I'd meet her at the car. Michael, Tom said quietly when I came up to him in line. They're going through all your past work. James has a group working late, changing the numbers you worked on. My stomach sank. They're hiding their tracks. He nodded, pale. And they just announced a company-wide meeting tomorrow about exciting forecasts for the next quarter. The numbers they're showing. He shook his head. They're not real. We both know it. Be careful, Tom. You too. They're saying things about you that you couldn't keep up, that you made mistakes. He grabbed his coffee and left quickly. I walked to Lisa's car, my mind racing. They weren't just hiding past cheating. They were making it worse, feeling bolder because I was gone. That night, David came over again. We spread printouts across my dining room table, papers I'd taken, analysis he'd started, rules that might have been broken. This goes deeper than I first thought, he said, tapping a certain spreadsheet. These patterns suggest the cheating started before James arrived. I frowned, looking at the timeline. That doesn't make sense. Mr. Peterson was careful, always did things the right way. When exactly did Mr. Peterson leave? Several months back. Sudden health issue. He'd been stressed, working late, but something clicked. I pulled up a different paper, the audit committee notes from my files. Mr. Peterson had mentioned being worried about pressure from the board to make the quarterly numbers look better just a week or two before his health issue. "You think they pushed him out?" Emily asked, setting down 3 drinks. "Not necessarily pushed," I said slowly. "But if he was being pushed to mess with results and wouldn't. The stress alone could cause health problems," David finished, "and create a chance to bring in someone who would be more flexible." I took a long drink. So James was hired specifically to continue or cover up cheating that was already happening? "It's an idea," David cautioned. "But look at the board changes last year. Some new people on the board from investment groups focused on growing tech companies. They probably wanted faster growth to get ready to sell the company." I looked through more papers, finding notes from board meetings. Here, they approved a plan where the top folks' pay was tied closely to how the stock did. The entire leadership team gets big bonuses if the share price hits certain goals. David nodded grimly. "Classic reason. And with Mr. Peterson gone, you were the last person in finance who might notice and complain." 4 hours, we put together the bigger picture. This wasn't just James. It was planned, involving people on the board, possibly other high-ups. The scale was huge. Bigger sales numbers than reality, costs tucked away, forecasts messed with, all designed to artificially push up the stock price before talk of being bought out, the official report next week. I realized if they reported these fake numbers for the last quarter, they were committing financial fraud out in the open and potentially hurting many people who invested. Around midnight, Lisa called with an update. Horizon Systems' head lawyer reached out. "They're pulling back the severance offer completely, saying you might have done something wrong." My laugh was empty. "What wrong?" "They're claiming you took private company papers and saying they'll use every legal option unless you return all company property right away." "They know," Emily said after I hung up. "They know you have proof, which means we've bothered them." David gathered the papers into a neat pile. "Michael, this has gone beyond just being unfairly fired. The federal financial watchdog needs to start a formal investigation." "What does that mean for me?" "You'd become an official whistleblower. There are ways to protect you, but it's still a hard path. These cases can take years. The company will likely attack your honesty, your work history, anything they can find." Emily took my hand. "Can they legally harm him?" "If everything you've shown me is correct, you haven't done anything wrong. But company defendants have resources, lawyers, and a reason to fight dirty." I thought about Horizon Systems, the company I'd helped build from its early days, about Mr. Peterson, who might have been pressured into a health problem for sticking to his principles, about Tom and others still they're being forced to be part of cheating or risk their jobs. "I'll need to think about this," I said. David nodded, understanding. The protection for whistleblowers is strongest when they act before they're fired or targeted. The timing here isn't perfect, but the proof is strong. After he left, Emily and I sat in silence for a while. "I could just walk away," I finally said. "Find another job. Let someone else deal with it." She studied my face. "Could you really sleep at night knowing what you know?" I already knew the answer. I'd never been able to ignore problems in front of me, to pretend numbers added up when they didn't. It was both what I was best at and what had cost me my job. "No," I admitted. "I couldn't." The federal financial watchdog moved faster than I expected. Once David officially brought the case to his bosses, things picked up quickly. I spent 2 days in private meetings at their offices walking investigators through everything I'd found. They were especially interested in when things happened, how the cheating grew, how James had purposely kept me out of looking over finances, the link to the top folks' pay being tied to how the stock did. "The company's report for the last quarter is due Monday," said Agent Kelly, the lead investigator. "Based on what you've given us, we have reason to act before then." "You can stop the filing?" I asked. "Better," she replied. "We can catch them in the act." What followed was a carefully planned operation. The federal financial watchdog would not tell Horizon Systems about the investigation yet. Instead, they'd watch the final steps of getting the fake report ready. They needed to catch the top folks knowingly handing in false financial statements. My job was to stay completely quiet. No talking to former coworkers, no social media, nothing that might alert them. Meanwhile, Lisa filed a claim about being unfairly fired, creating a distraction. Horizon Systems' legal team would focus on fighting that while not knowing about the bigger investigation happening quietly. On Friday, a few days before the report was due, Tom texted me from a new number. Finance chief called urgent Saturday meeting for finance group. Last look before Monday report. They're rushing it. I sent this to David without replying to Tom. We couldn't risk any leaks. Saturday morning brought unexpected news. David called early in the morning. Mr. Peterson's agreed to chat, he said, excitement showing in his professional voice. Mr. Peterson, my old boss. We approached him quietly the day before. He first said no, but after hearing how big what we'd found was, he changed his mind. This was the key breakthrough. Mr. Peterson had been there before, during, and right after the cheating started. He could talk about the pressure he'd received, point out who had pushed for messing with the accounting, and confirm what I'd found. By Saturday afternoon, Mr. Peterson had given an official statement to the federal financial watchdog. The pieces were coming together faster than any of us had thought. The night before, I barely slept. The report was due at 8 in the morning on Monday. Emily found me at the kitchen table at 5:15 a.m., staring at my phone. Whatever happens, she said, squeezing my shoulder, you did the right thing. David texted at 6:45 a.m., teams in position. Stay by your phone. At 7:30 a.m., report drafted and approved internally. We have copies. At 8:05 a.m., report sent to Watchdog. Go. At 8:50 a.m., financial news channels started reporting breaking news. Federal financial watchdog officers had entered Horizon Systems' main office with official papers and permissions. By 9:40 a.m., trading of Horizon Systems stock was stopped. At 10:20 a.m., camera crews showed James being led out of the building along with the CEO and a couple of other leaders. David called around lunchtime. It's done. They filed the fake numbers this morning despite Mr. Peterson having told them months back about the accounting issues. We have messages showing they knew the numbers were false. And we found proof they were planning to announce they were being bought next week, timed perfectly to sell their company shares at the higher price. I felt strangely empty watching the news coverage. The company I'd given over 10 years to was now a big news story. Former co-workers would face uncertainty. The stock would crash. Reputations would be ruined. Was there any other way this could have ended? I asked David. No, he said firmly. The cheating would have kept going until it fell apart on its own and hurt far more people in the process. My phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't know. It was Tom. They're saying, you were right all along about everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need someone to tell me I was right anymore. The numbers had shown it themselves. About 5 months after that Monday morning raid, I sat in a government court building listening as James admitted guilt to financial cheating, working together illegally, and lying to people who invested. The head of the company and 2 board members had already done the same earlier. I wasn't needed as a witness. The proof had been so strong that the case didn't go to a full court case. Mr. Peterson sat next to me, still looking a bit weak but with clear eyes. I should have fought harder, he said quietly as James was taken away. Instead, I let them push me out when my heart was giving warning signs. You did fight, I reminded him. You wrote everything down which helped prove what was happening. What the judge said filled the room. The defendants used their important jobs unfairly, messed with the money reports, and purposely lied to investors to make money for themselves. This court really dislikes company leaders who force their staff to take part in cheating and then fire those who won't follow orders. Afterward, outside on the steps of the court building, a news person knew who I was. Mr. Stone, you were the person who spoke up and showed the cheating at Horizon Systems. Any comment on them admitting guilt today? I shook my head and kept walking. This wasn't about being famous or proven right. That evening, I got an email from Horizon Systems' new temporary boss, a well-known expert in fixing company finances brought in by the board members who were left. The board would like to formally apologize for your termination, and the later tries to make you look bad. Being honest with money eventually kept this company from getting hurt even more. We would like to talk about you possibly coming back in a senior checking role as we rebuild trust with investors and staff. I showed the email to Emily. Are you thinking about it? She asked. I closed the laptop. No. Some things, once broken, shouldn't be fixed. The company that had cared more about growing fast than doing what's right, that had punished people for telling the truth and rewarded lying, wasn't one I wanted to help bring back, even with new management. About 6 months after the court day, I sat on our back deck watching autumn leaves fall. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Final deal announced. A $68 million fine. Investors who were cheated getting most of their money back. Not bad. I set the phone down and went back to the papers spread before me. A plan for a company that helps other businesses follow money rules. After the Horizon Systems case was big news, I'd gotten calls from companies wanting to make their money checks better, from legal groups needing people who knew a lot about the subject, from schools wanting me to come talk to students. Turned out there was a need for people who knew how money cheating worked and were brave enough to stop it. Mr. Peterson is calling, Emily called from inside. Says he has news. Mr. Peterson had been talking with the government department working to make it safer for people to report problems. His experience, both how it affected his health and his bravery to finally speak up, had made him a good helper for the cause. They're using the ideas we suggested, he told me, voice stronger than I'd heard in years. Safer ways to report, better chances for rewards, easier ways to speak up should make it simpler for the next person who sees something bad happening. That's good, I said, meaning it. That's really good. After we hung up, I made a few final notes on my business plan. The money I got for reporting had given us money stability. But this new business wasn't just for cash. It was about making being honest the usual thing, not the rare thing. Emily brought out coffee, sitting beside me. You never did tell me, she said. Exactly when did you know you had to report them? I thought about it. The moment they let me go. Not because I was angry, but because that's when I was totally sure I was right. They wouldn't have done all that otherwise. She nodded. Some people mistake being quiet for being weak. They were wrong, I said, watching another leaf drift down. I wasn't.